Welcome to The Life Engineer with Matty J. He unpacks and interviews guests to share the tools, components, and software that's needed to build a life and mindset by design versus one of default.
So, Bosh, so welcome, Joe Francis, Gardens for Good. So just explain, because we've spoke, but we've not seen each other before, I don't think, have we?
No, you're right, Matt. Yeah, hello, and thanks for having
Hello.
me. Good to see you. Good to see you at last.
But we have got a connection, which is quite deep. We've both done BC.
That's right. Yeah.
And you're a landscape gardener, and I use analogies for gardening in coaching. So we've connected and chatted, haven't we, over the time? Just briefly say what BC was for you.
So yeah, BC broadband consciousness, for those who don't know. It's a 5-day course, and I did it. I was on number 17 actually, which seems like
Oh
quite a long
really?
time now, yeah.
71 or 2, I think it was. Or BC 17.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And it was an amazing experience. I came to it because I was in actually a very desperate place at the time. I had a prolonged period of anxiety and depression and bouts of sort of suicidal thoughts. So, and I tried lots of things, and I coincidentally heard about someone talking about the course in a bar after a business meeting.
Right.
And kind of long story short, I ended up going on the course, and yeah, just an amazing 5 days spent with a small group of amazing people and run by Richard and Liz, of course. And it was really quite life-changing in many ways.
Yeah. So one of the reasons I remember, I found the sheet that I filled out. They send a questionnaire out on why you're going there. One of mine was, I'd gone on the BC day refresher thing. What's it called?
The recharge day.
Recharge day. And it synergized with a lot of stuff that I wanted to do and develop a course. And part of me went on there just to sniff out. It was what I wanted to do. And get confidence. And I think I put on there that I'm coming on to find out and get confident in what I was doing. So I use the weeding analogy. So where we talk about the script, which is what Richard and Liz talk about, I talk about that. I have to find things, synergies, to make it simple for me. So coaching for true colours. Oh, yeah. I've said this before in meetings, like, just tell me like I was 6, because it hurts my head sometimes when people talk about some things. And for me, the analogies help, like the script, what is it? And it's just a lot of bullshit that gets in the way of the true you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Richard sums it up beautifully. I think it's all the stuff you don't want, wouldn't choose, doesn't make you feel good.
Yeah. So when you come to gardening, and it's personal. So I muck around and I use the analogy of weeds and flowers in working with people. That measurement, -10 to +10. So in terms of happiness. So when you had suicidal thoughts, I had a client once that he said he was at -5 when he started to think about suicide, in terms of happiness being a measurement from -10 to like killing myself, and +10 to like shit's amazing. You know, there's a measurement. At what point does like maybe this ain't worth living? At what point does that come in, and how far have you got to go till like you're literally doing something to a point where you're trying, to a point where it's interesting. And I think it's the same with people financially now. With the COVID stuff, people don't realize how close they are to the edge. Same with finances, same with mindset. Everyone thinks they're fantastic, but the truth in a lot of people is they're bouncing around. So I use that gardening analogy with people in coaching, because it helps me see it differently. Like the script thing.
Yeah, I think it's a great way of illustrating it. And I remember certainly with the BC, I mean, the script it's a great way of explaining it. But sometimes, even after I had done the course, and for quite a while after, I was just trying to quantify it. Yeah, you kind of need something really visual, and certain things resonate for certain people, don't they? But very much on that.
Yeah, I think it's finding the tools. I think BC is a massive part. And I think this is like, so gardening, you know, weeding is a massive part. And you've got to get to the root. So on your second day at BC, I don't know if it was structured, but the first day was quite general and open, understanding the script. The second day was all like, we took turns, I think, to go around and unpack and talk. I think you get 20 minutes to talk, and everyone, I think I cried more that day than I think I've ever cried before, more that week.
Yeah.
And I remember Liz, when we got there, she was looking down the table at me because I'd said that I've done a lot of work on myself and I was open. And I remember almost goading her to like, go on then, open up. Go on then. And I went first.
Yeah.
And I just remember the work. And this is where, with gardening, opening up, same as plants, it's where the work is.
Yeah.
Because you stay closed, you never come out of like your truth. It never. So some of the things you do in gardening is, you know, you soak the seeds before you scatter them, maybe, or soak them so they get a chance to soften and open and align. And that whole process to me was where I got the analogies from. But I remember unpacking, and like root treatment at the dentist, when you get there and you go back, and I've got clients that they remember the day in the school or the change of schools or the point where it started. And before then, they were happy-go-lucky. And from that point onwards, something like a weed affected an area of their life forever. And when you start going back, because you can deadhead stuff in the garden, you think, oh yeah, it looks lovely, you know, and then then a week later, it's like, oh yeah, really? It just starts coming back up again, and getting back to the root of stuff, which is I found what we did with BC, and what I do very quickly with clients is find where the work is. And some of it, so I've got a note down here of inherited. I've got some titles because I've got a book coming together. A lot of the stuff I didn't realise in BC, my stuff was stuff that was actually passed down. So it was stuff and environments that I was in where people would be, and it would affect me. So my mind garden was violated and vandalised in terms of mental abuse, to a point where I lost myself. A bit like not having boundaries in the garden. Some dog comes in and shits on the lawn and smashes the gates down, and you know, and suddenly you've got to clear that up, or you've got to live in it. So inherited, what I mean by that is, so someone buys a plot of land and they've got trees in they don't want, or landscape they don't want, or earth that doesn't serve it. You start with that, and you can live with that, or you can cultivate it, can't you?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great analogy, and pretty much everyone who buys a house or rents a house has inherited a garden space from someone else, which
By
is
default.
Exactly, yeah. And whether that has had things intentionally planted in there, or they've just inherited weeds that someone else has inherited, then typically it's not the space that they would actually consciously choose.
Yeah, by design.
And it's
And
so
so
much
that
related to our lives.
Yeah, so that brings me down to Gardens for Good then. What's that? Just explain the business.
So we specialize in creating innovative, sustainable garden designs for our clients. And well, we've been going for 15 years now, but we started out as I started the business under the banner of outer space, and little play on words.
Right.
And it was I always pitched it as a premium design and build company. And in those days, we used to do the hands-on actually building as well. But then as the business kind of developed and evolved, and I care a lot about the environment and people, and just wanting to make a positive difference. And there was something about the Outer Space brand that I'd created that just wasn't really communicating that in the way that I really ideally wanted it to. And we wanted to just really get more of ourselves out under the banner of the business. And I played around with kind of tweaking the brand, but nothing really came to it until we discovered an organization called B1G1, Business for Good. A friend of mine recommended I look into it, and had a meeting with the chairman, Paul Dunn, and we signed up as lifetime partners there and then, really, because the beauty of B1G1 is you create giving through the things that you do, whatever it is, whether you're a garden designer or an accountant or a coffee shop. Every transaction or thing you do, you can then pay that forwards to the greater world. And hundreds of different organizations, 100% of what you give goes to them. So it's just an example. You can create a day's worth of drinking water for one less than American cent. So it's really cheap, really easy to do, but has a massive impact. So we embarked on that, and I thought this is great. We incorporated that into our business process. In chatting with Paul, I was saying, look, the brand's not really doing it for us. What we want to kind of start, we want to evolve it and change it in some way. And so in conversations with Paul, we kind of planted this seed of Gardens for Good. And I thought, wow, actually, do you know what, that really resonates. And over the course of a year, we set about rebranding the business completely into Gardens for Good. And it felt so right, because it really does say everything about what we're about. Because I mean, in terms of gardens, they're good for our clients, good for their family and friends, good for the environment, and animals and wildlife, good for their investments, but also it's good for the world too, because whenever we work with someone, then we create giving impacts around the world of planting trees or providing education. And it does say, it just feels very right, and that was important to us.
I like the fact that it evolves. I remember when I bought this house. So this is a cabin at the end of the garden. When I first did it, I was working in London, I was working in corporate, and I was traveling up every day. But I started landscaping it, and I had borders everywhere. I had rock pools, water features, and then you get to the stage where I can't keep up with this. This is a garden that my nan would have.
Yeah.
My nan doesn't work 14 hours a day, so I had to and I've done the same with businesses. That shift and adjusting to suit by design. So I lost some borders, and then changed some of the areas so it become more manageable. And it's shifted. It's the same with business evolving. Like this podcast for me is new. It's something I've got to start doing. So it brings me around to. So I've got a section here about fertilizer. The stuff you don't know, and along the way you have to get it. So like going to do like the BC course, it's like outsourcing. Someone comes in and invests in a gardener because they want a garden by design and they've got the money to outsource it. It's the same with the businesses. There's stuff you don't know when you start off, and you can't cheat stuff, can you?
No.
Like establishing a garden. Some stuff you put in, it takes a while to establish. Like we literally just planted some stuff under a tree here this year, but we did some stuff around the pond with some railway sleepers last year, and that's come up. Like you can't rush the two. This is just a simple truth in stuff. I use the analogy of the you cut through the habits, like the rings in a tree, the habits. I went on the treadmill this morning. I'm trying to get consistency with what I'm doing. So I'm doing stuff twice a day, and not every day, but the consistency of stuff.
Yeah.
And people don't realise, like, you've been doing this business for, what did you say, 11 years, 7 years?
15 years.
15 years.
Yeah.
You don't, when you go back and look at when you started, you'll laugh at how you did things then. And it's funny then, isn't it? But you can't cheat that ladder. I remember talking to Liz about mental health, and I used to use the word, it's like physical health, like only inside, I've got a six-pack. And I can see that in some people when they've done the work on themselves. You can see that. And with Liz, it was like she's gorgeous outside and inside. And I joked around with Richard that they've done that work on themselves. It's like you looking in a garden. Some gardens you look in, they might look nice. Like my lawn, if you looked at it, it's riddled. I've got to get some sort of treatment on it. But from a distance, my brother bought one of those little helicopter things with the drones.
Oh yeah.
From a distance, it looks lovely, lovely. And then as it starts coming down, you can see the lawn, and then there's the bits in between the patio and down the side of the house, and everyone's got that work to do, haven't they? On the
there's a bit of details in there as well. Going back to what you were saying about the sort of bringing the fertilizer in and kind of having that internal. I think a lot of it comes down to vision, and I think why we're having this conversation is obviously the parallels of life and gardens and things, and particularly being a designer, going to see someone's garden, and you'll know this, being sort of business coaching and such like, you see the situation that someone's currently in, and one of the most important things is for them to have that vision of where they want to get to.
Yeah.
And like you say, it can take a while before you start to see the fruits you labour. For example, with your railway sleeper beds and things. but you would have put those in knowing that you wanted to create something that was going to then kind of almost manifest itself further down the line, but you had to create that plan and that vision to at least have some idea of what you wanted to create. And okay, it doesn't always turn out exactly as you expect, but that's part of the magic of life.
Yeah, I came up with this thing with my coach that literally you've got creativity and you've got GSD, which is getting shit done. And when they meet, so if we sat there like I did with the railway sleep, I use Pinterest a lot. I come up with ideas. I'm brewing up something to do out the front, the carport. I come up with the creativity, and that's where you've got to sit with being creative and unpacking, like a plant would unpack all the shit you've want to get done. And I've got this process. There's a hero's journey that talks about a circular. I engineer systems in where people can go through the process and being open, coming up with an alignment and creativity, coming up with a system. And then you get to a point where you've just got to get shit done.
Yeah.
So it's all right to sit there and we're doing something next door with the decking and come up with your ideas. But again, each day, you know, like I've ordered the decking, but there's a delay on it. So I'm prepping the wood now and I'm breaking it down. You're talking in Growing a Dream Come True. We talk about lighting a fire. And you don't just throw on an oak tree to get a flame burning. You start with something really small and then you build on that. Some of the sessions, so I do a 3-hour session, and some of them, you don't find there's that much movement because they don't really know what they want to do. They think they want to go over there. And when you really put a mirror around it, like a guy the other day was talking, he wanted to know his own business. When you really put a mirror around it and he understood what his own business was, he didn't really want that. He just didn't want to be working for a load of dickheads. There's a difference between that and having your own business. And when I talk about purpose and alignment, mine is around creativity and design. I don't really care. People think, oh, he's a life coach, he must care. I don't really. I care about the questions I ask to get the outcome. But if that means you sit there and cry for an hour, then so be it. My mum wouldn't ask that question because she wouldn't want to make you feel uncomfortable. She cares in that sense. So anything I do that's got creativity in it is easy for me in terms of purpose. So coming back down to design, and I use the term know yourself to grow yourself. When you're placing, because I think we spoke before and you had been designing gardens or designing planting or preparing planting, but something about planting. So if I've got a garden that's got a certain soil and a certain position and a certain alignment, when you, a bit like businesses take on people, and I've had a problem developing engineers because a lot of people turn up and go, yeah, I want to be a lift engineer. Oh, why is that? Well, mum said I've got to have a trade. You know, it's like, do you really want to be sitting on your own in a lift shaft with nuts and bolts getting covered in shit and travelling all over the country? Well, no, not really. I quite like talking to people. Well, there's not many people in lift shafts. You know, and I've had engineers before, and I just think to myself, they should be selling because they spend half their day talking to the site agent. Yeah, but he's my best mate. Well, have you fitted any guides? No. You know, there's a natural thing, like a plant. When I talk about purpose, they find the sun and they move to the sun. It's the energy. People don't do that. They go where the money is, or they go where something. It's like default. But to align yourself fully, like you're doing the gardening, and you probably like being outdoors, the nature. There's an alignment with that that's made it easy for you to do for 15 years and enjoy.
To a large extent when the script's not there, but I'm not going to lie, it has been a tough journey, and it's certainly not been a bed of roses, no pun intended. But I know what you're getting at, and with the plant analogy, and say someone who might think they're going to go and work in a lift shaft, it's like you can. There's so many different attributes to a plant, which environmental and sort of situational, which needs to be ideal for them to really grow and flourish and be the best that they can be. And the same with us as people, really. And if you take a plant and put it in the wrong position with not enough light and not the right nutrients and you know, all the rest of it, crowded by other plants. So some plants would love that, you know, they're designed to be in that situation. But other plants, that's just really wrong for them, and they're just not going to do very well. So it's so important. And like you say, go where the money is. It's like buying, I've got a £500 plant, and I just absolutely love it. Look how amazing it is, and I go and plant it in the corner of the garden, and it just dies. It's like, there's just no point. It's better to buy a £50 plant and put it where it's actually really going to flourish and watch it really grow and develop. So yeah, I love that analogy.
Yeah, I use the compass analogy. So if I put a magnet to this, so that in truth, if we let this truth lie, it would point north. And if everyone aligned themselves north, and they might have to go east, west to get around shit, but if they went north, so like when you say the business is difficult, you're probably doing shit in the business you don't want to do, but you've got to do it. You know, like your year-end taxes. How fun is that for you, the gardening man? You know,
yeah, not great.
Get all yummy about doing your books and putting your receipts in, or you outsource it. But the idea is you try and I try and get people to lose what's south and move to what's north. So outsourcing bookkeeping, if it kills you, which it does me. So using that analogy for people to, and you've got to feel it. It can't be something. You know, if I said to you, oh, yeah, your gardening thing's fine, but if I give you 10 grand a day, will you come and work in the lift shafts with me? It's 10 grand a day. You know, would you do that?
Well, yeah. Do you know what? I might think, oh wow, I'll go and try it, and then after a couple of days, I probably think this is really just not worth it.
There's no sun,
no plant life,
no colour. You know, but there'll be someone that would want to, you know, just couldn't wait to get out of the garden and plants and shit and get mechanical and start eating stuff, and they get excited about a DeWalt show and a Makita fest. You know, it's like there's I found that I got into the lift business out of default. My dad had a lift company, and it was like, I remember talking to him, persuading him, yeah, I want to be an electrician and that. I just remember I wanted to go on the piss. I wanted money, and this will be a good way to get a job. I remember just really engineering it. Yeah, that's what I want, Dad. And I remember afterwards thinking, and there's no creativity in that. Or if I do create creativity in it, it just takes me away from, you should be feeling this. So it's default, but it's interesting to know yourself. You know, if you had to design a plant system and you didn't have any labels that are in the plant, you had nothing to say, I've got a fern here, and it's indoors, it's meant to be going and being planted, but I pulled it in because I like it. I love ferns, I don't know why, but if you had all those plants without that knowledge and you planted them, you know, I've done this in the garden. I've spent thousands probably or hundreds on plants, and then there's like, why do they, or it just grows massive and I can't see anything out of the way of it because I didn't know it. I didn't.
That's it. It's common challenge for people. Is that, oh, this looks nice, and let's pop it in there, but it's just without really understanding what is right for that plant, then you're not going to get the results you want, and you end up wasting time, money, energy, and it's the emotional stress of watching your hard work just wilt and die is quite upsetting as well. So like I say, really important to understand the landscape, and
we don't have any education on ourselves. Like when my kids are just going through picking their exams and stuff, and it's pathetic when you think about how much work's done on getting them to understand what it is that gives them the energy. Like if you had £1 billion and didn't have to work, what would you still be in the gardening? Would you still be doing bookkeeping? There'll be certain things you would be doing, you know, and you'd be outsourcing the rest, like go and dig that over. You probably wouldn't do the digging, or you may do, but it'd be better to stand there and say, plant that there, plant that there, plant that there. I'm going to come back in a day.
The irony is actually we outsource a lot of our build stuff. We have contractors that do all the installation. But actually that was one thing that I always loved doing. So if I had £1 billion, I probably would be out.
With a digger, maybe.
Yeah, that's right. But it's interesting, like going back to what you're saying about when you say I enjoy the business and the worst stuff. I mean, business is challenging. It's as life can be very challenging. You did touch on a very good point that a lot of the reason why there's aspects I've not enjoyed is because being a very small business, I do pretty much everything myself with the help of my wife as well. And thankfully she picks up the slack on quite a few areas that I don't love. But there's still a lot of things I have to do which are not within my my flow.
Goes against the grain, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. My challenge is being a perfectionist and a bit of a control freak in terms of just wanting things to be perfect and everyone to have an amazing experience that I then have to do all that to make sure that it's delivered in such a way. And
Yeah.
that's just a challenge I'm kind of working on at the moment.
I think there's two things there. So that a lot of the time when I work with people that are elevating in business, that letting go. So when we talk about letting go in the autumn in the garden, if it didn't let go and we didn't have autumn, we wouldn't have spring. So I talk about letting go, and actually with a lot of people, even the script is about letting go. You know, you're not good enough. You know, it's whatever it is about letting go of that. What that was in the script and the sheet, and when you can let go of it. And it's the same with that perfectionist. So we use so let go of all that shit is where the work is. And it's the same in business. So to outsource and to create a business and to delegate out, you've got to outsource, and that's letting go of responsibility, let go and delegating effectively, and that letting go. And some of the times those limitations are that you can't let go, or you haven't got a system to let go effectively. And that's where because being in a landscape gardener, being specific, precise, and that is the power that gives you the edge and makes you excellent. So I talk about what is some people's weaknesses are actually their strengths. So in the right environment, being detailed is how you're so good. It's knowing when does that serve you, when does it not. You know, and it's a case of understanding and letting go that in the right environment. So I coached actually Zoe, who was on the podcast that's being published today. She talked about she's too sensitive, and we unpacked that. And it's not that she's not too sensitive, because too sensitive is amazing. If you want to be dealing with your family and your kids and your friends, and that too sensitive is shit when people affect it. You know, when someone comes in and kicks the heads off your flowers, then you need protections. And that was what the tool that she put in, and she realigned what she thought was I'm too sensitive into a superpower, that she's so sensitive, but she protected it. And this is where boundaries come in, and that with the garden, that you have to have that. So there's an element of that is it works for you. It's when it doesn't serve you and it's just trying to work out, that might be the right thing to do. And I think the systems, I remember having a VA once I used in India for a while, and I remember outsourcing, and I remember the system I used for it. So I asked him to look for things, personal development, equipment and stuff that you can do with your family. Because in Think and Believe, we wanted to do a pop-up shop. So it was stuff like rounders, throwing a ball that you can do with the kids in a garden that would give you more fun and happiness in life with friends. That was the sort of thing. But I remember getting back an email, and it was just like 2 or 3 pages of cricket stuff. Now this guy was out in India, and I remember thinking like he had done everything I'd said. When I read my email back, I hadn't been specific. It's like there's a system in delegating where you come up with agreements, and having control and creating those systems is how you effectively delegate. Because if you can't have them, you haven't got control, you've got limitations. Well, I can't delegate, I can't bring anyone on because no one can do stuff like me. Well, then it's just you then. Then there's limitations in there. And sometimes that's the right way of doing stuff. I've actually designed business so I've got less connections and commitment because I'm freer. Yeah. So it comes back down to by design, you know. If you want that big acre with a pond and a lake, then there's work, isn't there?
Absolutely, yeah. It's got to be done. It's got to be, like I say, planned out properly as well. It's interesting, actually, Matt. You mentioned there about sensitivity and how your previous person you interviewed was seeing sensitivity as a challenge. Because I'm also very, very sensitive, and in certain situations it can be a challenge. But certainly in the line of work that I'm in, is really beneficial because it helps you connect with people and the environment a lot more. And it can be, let's say, a challenge if you're in a very insensitive world. That was part of the beauty of BC. I remember when I first had a chat with Richard, and I was chatting to him, and I was on the phone in a bit of a state.
Who's a sensitive soul, isn't he?
Yeah, he just said, look, there's nothing wrong with you. You're just super sensitive. You're a sensitive person,
which is lovely
in an insensitive world. And it was just such a realization. Like, wow. And being a guy as well, you know, because guys typically, historically, we just wouldn't kind of talk about sensitivity or
Yeah.
be open about it.
You'd be called a pussy.
No, well, yeah, it's not a done thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It does seem to be a changing tide at the moment, with people being a lot more open and yeah, more connected to that sensitivity and more understanding of it. And I think rather than us trying to put on this really kind of hard, tough shell and fit into places that we just really don't feel comfortable about, it is like I say, it's like the pack of seeds, unpacking those seeds and say, right, okay, where am I going to best flourish? And that's okay if you want to, I don't know, go and do something that's not necessarily seen as the hard, tough man stuff. Then you know, just do whatever is going to nurture you best. That's so important.
I think the space. So Think and Believe that we set up is called a place to grow. And I think one thing that I do with coaching, the first thing is create the environment where you can feel comfortable. You know, BC was one where you've got, I think there was 8 of us around there. And what's good with the group stuff is you understand that every fucker has got the same thing. And I remember, so we've got a WhatsApp group, and it's funny. So I like the analogies. I also like the boxing analogy, because I did a white collar a few years ago, and going into that environment, getting in the ring, and how paralyzing the fear can be around everyone's watching, it's going to smash your face in, like the realness of being in that environment. It's a similar space to BC. It's a similar space to coaching, where you're being exposed. It's like, okay, well, that's a physical one. Joe, you come and you smash my face in, and then if you can hit me, then I know that I've got work to do then. If you can't, then happy days. And I remember the same feeling of mindset, that you can smash the shit out of stuff. And it doesn't mean you've got to be aggressive. I like that feeling. I remember this kicked off in a pub once, and I remember laughing, just thinking, I'd been kickboxing for a couple of years, and I remember thinking, I'm not hard, but I know that I can do something. And having those tools and that equipment to knowing BC, knowing all the stuff I know now, you're in that space, but you have to be in that environment to be uncomfortable and around it. And my point coming back to is the appreciation afterwards. I remember the coach giving us a speech about how we're going into the ring, we're all together, it's really difficult, and we'd all been sparring and that. I think all these blokes would be like, yeah, we are fucking scared. And you know, you wanted to, like, it was like, it isn't this uncomfortable, like, together, isn't it uncomfortable? It was quite nice. So I've got some boxing guys coming on, and I think they're quite sweet, because when they are like pro boxers, are so comfortable, because if you do say something, they will smash your face in, and that allows them to be comfortable. Not all of them, you know, are that good, but having those boundaries and that ability allows you to be open. And in the space, my point is, in the space to be open, you've got to have that space, because people can come in and affect you and take the piss and and that's where, you know, where we had with BC and again with landscaping the gardens, you know, if you didn't have boundaries up, well, they'd just go and nick the hot tub and smash in, you know, plants and stuff would come in. It's easy in life to see, in gardens to see, well, they've got good boundaries. But in life, you're walking around, what makes that up? Because the BC stuff's all right, but if you're with someone or around someone that keeps shitting on your lawn, you can understand what it is, but you've got to keep clearing it up. And there's a certain point, we joke in my house that I'm borderline weeds versus flowers, and my wife's sometimes like, shut up. She has to manage me, because I'm that flower that would take over if I'm not managed.
Right.
But we joke and we play around with that. There are some plants that you put in there, you let people know this is going to go crazy. We'll have to keep on top of it. I think someone said, is it a bamboo that has to, but you plant that in a tub, because otherwise it just...
Yeah, you need to contain the roots. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and if you don't do it unexpected, then it can start growing through neighbours' gardens and concrete and... Yeah,
so it's probably borderline weed versus flower.
Yeah. I was just interested, Matt. We're going back to the boxing analogy. We say going into the ring, And you know what, life can sometimes be like that. It's not always going to be easy and pleasant, and you are going to come across some people who are potentially, like, hopefully metaphorically, going to want to smash your face in in the extreme sense. But you also mentioned about the team and the guys you were with. And I think that's another really important thing to remember, is that having the right people around you, like your support team, is vital in life, really. And that was a massive thing. Probably one of the biggest things I took away from the BC course was being part of this community of people who understand you, and you know that you just understand each other, because you're all just very open about your feelings and where you've been. And there's something about that sort of mutual level of understanding, which just makes you feel super comfortable and very relaxed. And it's not often you get that in life, really. So to have your kind of your tribe, or your team, or whatever it is, I think it's really important to fall back on and to support in those challenging times.
I joked with the group that I'd felt like we'd all gone streaking together. Like we'd all stripped off and gone, because it is exposing yourself emotionally. And everyone, I don't know about you, but everyone that went round the table, there wasn't a single dry. Everyone cried. Liz and Richard, that second day was so powerful. And I had gone up there with a tent. I had the truck up there. I was camping up. Then I went back to the tent at night, just slept. I was exhausted.
Yeah.
But what I do, and this clients feel like this, but that process of unpacking and unweeding that clients talk about in the session, of feeling that freedom, once that's out there, it's a bit like you go into a garden and you just rip up all the weeds. There's a freedom of potential there, that you can enjoy that space without all the shit in it, or you can start then planting and cultivating more of what you love. So I remember coming away and I had this sheet that I'd done and what I was going to build. And I think this is where the gardening thing was already there. So I put on the end of it, it was like build more joy. And I think on the end of every word, I put joy-o or joy-o, and it was fun-o, and everything was like happy-o. And I put it on the end, and we all joked about how every word I put in there. But I remember thinking I think that was probably where the coaching for true colours come from. That was unpacking that colour, that you're being Joe. Let's get Joe out. And let's get Joe and not cover it in the shit of script and weeds that can be and has been inherited, that pure landscape. And it is personal. Like I say, it's funny, I've got a friend of mine, when you talk about plants, we did a karaoke and I was like, oh, we'll go up now because there's not many people watching. He's like, no, I want to wait until enough people are watching. He was like the plant that wants to be up front. And if he hasn't got that much sun, he doesn't want to know. Like in work, he wants the contracts at like £2 million because 200 grand's it's not big enough. He's a goal scorer. He's up front in football. And those people want that place up front. I'm quite hardy. I can pretty much go everywhere. But some people in placement, it's similar, and it is interesting when you can unpack the truth in you, like we did with the script.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and the placement as well. And it's I think it's easy to look at how other people are and think, I should be more like that. I did that for many years until I sort of really got a deeper understanding of myself and who I am and what I'm about, and what helps to nurture me is not what nurtures someone else. And it's like your example of he wants the £2 million job. Some people would much prefer the 200 grand job, or even the 20 grand job. It's like, right, that's where I'm most comfortable, and that's okay. Because there's something for everyone, rather than I just feel like I'd always have to be striving to be the best, or if not better than everyone else. And it's so tiring, really.
It is exhausting. And I did this one about don't jump taller, grow taller, because the jumping part of it, people that are running around, that are out there with cars they can't afford, houses they can't afford, they're jumping to be better than they are, and it's exhausting. So come back, and come back down.
Because you're going to come back down to ground somehow, aren't you?
Where the fuck you are? We joked with Richard on BC because we talked about Tony Robbins, and he's got a jet, and Richard was like, he hasn't even got. I haven't got a jet, and he was like, we was joking how you can you know, and I think I joked I was going to get him a kite. I've not done it yet. I might send it to him. That at least he could be the coach that's got a kite.
Brilliant.
I haven't got a jet.
Yeah.
And that perception of, well, you must be shit then.
Yeah, brilliant. It's it's such a common misconception that we just get.
Yeah, I think it is looking at the Joneses, you know, that this is what they've got, and then being comfortable with you, because by design, you know, your landscaping company, if that was a multi-million-pound company, where you never got to go onto the gardens because you was too busy in meetings, then how much then would you be aligned? Like these teachers that go in and become headmasters and that spend 90% of their time managing and 10% with kids. It's a bit like that meat on the bone for piranha. You know, there's nothing there when you're finding your alignment in energy, you know. Like you say, you still would be hands-on in the garden, being creative. But businesses, and this is where I think people need to understand with getting your own business, is there's at least 10 or 20% of your time that's going to be doing shit, at least. That's got nothing to do with gardening.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, phoning up quotes, VAT, banking, purchasing, all that sort of stuff. And then at some point during the day, you're planting or getting ready for, you know?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's such a common thing for people. The E-Myth, I'm guessing you may well have read the E-Myth. Right? We're technicians doing the work that we love. I was like, oh, I really enjoy this. And then we have the entrepreneurial seizure where we think, oh, crikey, I could do this so much better myself. So I go and set up my own business and I'm doing whatever it is I'm doing and I'm really enjoying it. But then not realizing that actually there is a whole world of stuff more than just the doing of it. You, as well as being the technician, you've obviously got to be the manager and the entrepreneur as well. And it's
I think it is, and that's why I like the compass thing. It's working out what's north, what's south, and then spending time engineering out south, because that's stuff that you've got to do. Like for me, we joke. So I used to test lifts, and there's like a 46-page document you've got to fill out. So I'm all right going on site with the lads, getting it set up or testing it and going through all that sort of stuff. And I fill out a lot of it on my iPad. But there was a point when I would write all the notes I needed to and then go and have to go back and fill in the test sheet. And to me, that was just like so boring. There was no creativity in that. I could have a laugh with the guys on site. I would be fault finding or I'd be doing something. There'd be creativity in that. But to sit down and fill out a sheet, I'd have to align it. So we got to a point, she used to invoice it. And sometimes they'd pay before I'd even done the test sheet. So we stopped and she wouldn't even send the invoice until I gave her the test sheet. So but we had a system, and it made a system that I would get my shit done because I needed the invoice to go out, and that's why. So aligning some of the stuff like and doing the test sheet while I was there would make it easier. So I'd engineer out some of that work, you know, like cleaning your tools. If you left it and had to do it all at once, you know, cleaning up after you is a better way than leaving it all to the end. So there's stuff like that we engineer out of that south. So you know you can get to whatever your north is, and knowing that first is the key thing. So in your job, so mine's creativity. Like I like developing property. I like developing the businesses. I like some of the work, like these conversations and coaching. My interest is in coming up with the right conversation to get you to see differently. It's the creative in the questions that the power is in for me in that creativity. So I know that in everything I do, if I can align that, then it's a fucking easy day. And it's the same with your landscaping. In what part of that is the pure north bit? Is it the creativity? Is it engaging with the clients? Because some people may do the landscape gardening. I coached a guy once who was plumbing, and he was plumbing for new builds, and the builder just wanted a certificate at the end of the day, but his purpose was more around helping. And he shifted to doing call outs. So instead of going to a builder where he just wears the certificate, he went to Betty, who's not had water for a day and she needed to have a bath, and he fixed it, and she said thank you. But it's same business, it just shifts. You know, you can feel the energy change in that. Whereas some people don't want to talk to Betty. You know, they just want to smash the job in or whatever it is, that they just align differently. But depending on who you are and what you are, the energy shifts if you shift that
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sensitive types often tend to be very much people. And yeah, that certainly I know from the other day we did um, if I say that I don't really do the digging, for the first time in many years, I was out and I implemented a planting scheme for someone who lives locally because we couldn't find someone to do it. I thought, you know what, I'm going to do it myself because I so miss being out. A lot of my work these days is designing laptop-based emails, yeah, building the business. So I'm going to get my hands dirty and come and plant this scheme. And it was only a day's worth of planting, working to a planting plan that I designed. And a friend came and helped me, and we planted it all out. And the guy came out, and his wife and his kid were so excited all day. They're like, "Oh, we're so looking forward to this. It's amazing." And he came out at the end of the day. He said, "This has just been the best investment ever. We are so pleased." And I just knew that it was worth getting the professionals in to do it. And honestly, I was standing there and I was just buzzing with this amazing feeling, just thinking, "Wow, this is so cool." And I've missed that since the days about 5 years ago. We switched to just design and we stopped the landscaping, so we contract everything out. And I just miss that sense of being able to stand there, see what you've done, and see the client just light up with
Powerful, isn't it? Yeah.
it's amazing. There's something so powerful about that human connection and that appreciation and sharing a moment is
And
that's money
I
can't really
think
buy that. It's awesome.
again, it's personal. I think that's where if you're identifying where the energy's been or is in your life, and that day was one of them, where it was so that to me would be, you'd be putting that at the top of the compass and trying now to make tomorrow like that, because those days. I sometimes say to people, like, what's funny? What would make it funny to earn money? Like, so funny that you was earning money doing that. Standing there with those people and getting paid to make that happen, good money. You'd be like, laugh. How is someone in a position where you can do that? And that ease. When you look at the energy from the plant, and the plant's role is to align with the sun to get hot, to be attractive for the bees. That's what I read. That's what they do, is they got to align with the sun to get the hottest they can, the warmest they can, to sense the most, to attract the bees, and that's their purpose. So if you think of how that felt when you was in that place and those people were so excited and happy, were you warm and open and aligned, or were you cold and angry or closed? And when you can find that point, you'll get the best out of Joe. It'll be like easy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you understand? And you only feel that, and it's easy being sensitive for you because you'll be open and this will be easy. But people that are closed, it takes a while for them to open, which is what I do, to be able for them to even connect and feel. Because sometimes they're not. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's all it can be quite a sort of a completely new world for a lot of people, can't it?
If they're closed.
Yeah.
Richard, I think he had a good one. Two daffodils. One is saying life is shit. It's bollocks, it's shit, and the other one's like, this is amazing. And then they said that one was still in the ground and one was up and open, and that was the difference. So both of them were true. That they just hadn't been aligned and weren't open.
A great analogy, that. And they said that everyone is a daffodil. Some of them just underground, and that's okay. We've got our own perspective of it, but certainly, the BC course helps people poke through the soil and see the sunshine, which is amazing.
So you said, so your two recent shows, there's a couple of points we made before. You talked about the power to make a difference and calm amidst chaos. So you've done some shows. So I talk about gardening from an amateur point of view, but you're actually a proper, you've been and done shows and all sorts of stuff.
We've done quite a few shows actually. So those two were Hampton Court Palace Flower Show gardens. The Power to Make a Difference was what I did back in 2017. And it was all about the human impact on the planet and the environment, both negative and positive. So it was a cool garden. It was in a big kind of teardrop shape, and there was a swirling path that went round. It went through this sort of barren landscape of rubble and rubbish and debris and deforestation, all the kind of the detrimental aspects of human impact. And as it went round through the garden, it then started to turn. There was a big kind of chaotic mass in the middle of the path, which then sent it off in a new direction into this more wilded space that had been intentionally kind of regenerated by people, and just bee-friendly plants and collecting water, habitats for animals and feeding the birds, and just so many simple things that we could all employ in our own garden. And the thing that inspired that was a couple of things, actually. Firstly, we just switched to Gardens for Good, so I wanted to stamp our name on the map. But mainly was how much I care about the environment and what we're doing to it, and feeling helpless really for so many years, just thinking, it's just such a massive challenge. What on earth can one person do? So the fundamental message of the garden was that we each have the power to make a difference, and that if we employ just one little thing from the garden that we were presenting, if everyone did one thing, and it could be as simple as putting some food out for the birds. If everyone does something, then that actually adds up to a huge cumulative effect, and that has a massive difference. So actually inspiring people that as individuals we can make a difference. So it was a really cool garden. Actually, I should say the centerpiece of that garden was a giant block of ice that was about 10 foot tall, and we had irises frozen inside it, which signified hope. And over the course of the show, the ice was melting, and it was very dramatic. It was had quite an impact. So there's photos on our website of it if people want to see it. And then last year, in fact, doing that project was mind-blowingly stressful, and particularly because of my concerns around the environment, and I was trying to get this message across. And through the show, I was standing there looking at this massive block of ice melting, because it was really hot and it was very windy, which are the two worst things for ice. And I was watching the thing kind of crack and sort of start to lean over, and that was causing me massive anxiety. And I was standing there thinking, we've created this show garden, which is just a phenomenal undertaking, but actually watching it is just increasing my anxiety levels, because it's kind of the manifestation of all the stuff that my deepest hopes and fears around the planet.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was a tremendous success, but I did say afterwards, if we do a show garden again, I'm going to make it super simple and all about relaxation. So we can just put it together and I'll sit down, I'll relax the whole process and just make a really wonderful place.
Do you know, it's funny with the gardens. So for years, I remember having, because we've got a nice garden, and I bought a day bed. And I remember thinking to myself, and I did this in coaching. I remember when I started my coaching, I remember looking in the mirror, and I have this thing when I think, Sharon calls it something out of Star Trek. I can't remember what it is. I have this thing here when I'm serious. I remember looking in the mirror thinking to myself, you're a life coach, and I don't think I'd laughed at all that day or smiled. I remember thinking that, and this is one of the things that BC helped release, is that constant need or attention, that enjoying the garden and enjoying life. I do at the end of my courses, I do this section on Breathe, where it's giving you that permission, like you say, that garden and all the stuff you was doing in it, when actually, and my point here was in my garden, all I did was work. I never enjoyed it. And now we've engineered, like the stuff we're doing next here is just a barbecue area where we're going to sit and the family and the kids are going to have their mates up here. It's just a fun, free space. And we've sat in our garden this year more than I have over the last 5 years, and giving yourself permission to enjoy that. It's different, isn't it? There's a different part.
Oh, definitely. And it's about creating fun. And another thing Richard and Liz talk about is people stand around, we sit around waiting for fun or for things to make us laugh, but it's all about creating these things. You've got to consciously create it, and that's basically what we did with the second show garden, Calm Amidst Chaos. Although I didn't intend it to, all the chaos did actually follow me, and while I wanted to do it just a really simple, peaceful place, it ended up being this mass wasteland of, again, rubble and rubbish, and it was smoking, and We had a giant bomb in the garden, and oil slicks. It was like all the really intense coffins and wheelchairs. It was, people saw it. Some people were crying because it was just, what is this doing in an RHS show? This is too overwhelming. I said, no, look inside. And in amongst all this chaos was the most tranquil space. This little kind of just serene garden space that was such a contrast from the outside world. And it was a physical garden space, and we invited people in. You could feel the energy of this place to me, but the deeper message was that creating that place within us. So life is chaotic and full on and overwhelming, and the modern world is just, it's pretty complicated, really. But actually, if we can cultivate that sense of peace within us, then it's the best way we can deal with the challenges that we all have to face in life, really.
Yeah. I use this term black and white for a colourful life, and I like in boxing the stance that to have that space and have that stance and to protect it, you can cultivate it within. But if people are sitting there thinking about how bad the world is, then it does implode, and it just seems too hard to do. I did this thing, dancing without music, and the thing is, it's so uncomfortable to dance without music. You'll do it if you had music on and you was pissed up and your mates were there and everything was right. You'd be dancing, but take away a couple of them and it's like, I can't dance now. And it's like that finding that one move is just the first part of it. And so that garden, amongst that chaos, you find that, what was the cartoon, Wall-E, where he found that one plant on the land?
Yeah.
And
great
and
film.
that finding that that one thing, and then cultivate that from that point, that you can, and it's quite a powerful thing to if you can create that environment within to bring out that part of you and that bit of you and protect it without it being affected or messed up mindset wise, same as in the garden. You can then start to cultivate by design. But it's there's lots of aspects to it. We could probably talk all day about it.
We could do, but also sharing that with others, and starting to inspire other people. And that's where the kind of your team or your tribe, your culture, whatever, it starts to grow, and you surround yourself with like-minded, like-hearted people. That's so important. And it reminds me of a little story I'll tell you very quickly. The Bombay Laughing Club. I don't know if you heard about this.
No.
So in Bombay, massive city, completely overrun. It's so busy, and it was just there was a small group of people, handful of people, just saying, this is just, it's too much, really. We need to lighten up a bit. So let's meet in the park and we'll tell a few jokes. So a group of guys kind of got together and started telling jokes in the park at lunchtime. And they'd tell some jokes and have a laugh, and a few of their mates came and joined, and they'd tell some jokes and they'd have a laugh. Until one day they turned up and they looked around and they said, oh, shit, no one's got any jokes. It's like, really? Oh, well, what we're going to do then without any jokes? What? And someone said, well, should we just laugh anyway? Okay, yeah, go on, let's just laugh anyway.
Yeah.
And honestly, so began, that's where laughter yoga came from.
Right.
Bombay Laughing Club. And do you know what? The crowds started to grow and grow. And this park is packed with people just laughing without any jokes, because they can just
it's dancing without music.
Exactly.
It's funny. I had a coach that had a group, and one of the things he said was about smiling. So like smile, and then what happens eventually, and it's a bit like dancing without music. You can do it and it feels uncomfortable, but then eventually like laughter comes through and dancing comes through. You sort of almost got to break through that. And it was funny, he set people a task, and this one guy, he was a gardener. He sat in a shed and he videoed himself. He said, right, I'm going to do this thing now. And he just stood there with his face like that. He went, I feel a bit silly now. And honestly, I laughed. He went, I feel really silly now. He went, oh, it's becoming a bit easier. And now it's quite fun. And he went through this whole emotion of like, oh, now I'm a bit conscious. But he kept this smile on. I fucking cried with laughter. But it's funny that So I talk in the garden about the water. You've got one watering can, which is 24 hours, and you get what you focus on. And if you focus on funny and you water funny, you'll get funny, and you get what you water. And it's a bit like that in life. If it's like business is hard, you know, Richard's sausage machine, you know, you get what you put in.
Absolutely.
And it's the same with the garden. You know, if you're going to water something, you're going to get it. If you're going to water the weeds, you'll get them. And if you don't water them, then you won't get them.
Well, that's it. You get back what you look for. It's kind of there's a certain law of attraction there, but there's also have you heard of the RAS, the reticular activating system?
No.
Oh, okay. This is great. And it's a great coaching tool as well. So the reticular activating system is a system in your brain, which is you can kind of we're not aware of it, but you can turn it on off. You only buy a new car, or you're looking to buy a new car, and you see that car everywhere.
Oh yeah. We do that with the red and yellow thing. Yeah. So
well, that's it. Yeah. So you can do it now. If you look around and say, right, okay, I'm going to look for blue, look for everything that's blue, and your eyes will just automatically lock on to anything that's blue. Like, it's amazing. Okay, then change your color, right? And look for yellow, and your mind just automatically switches to it. And it's the same. I sometimes do this. Say, right, well, I want a fun day, so I'm going to go out. I'm just going to look for fun.
Yeah.
And sure enough, it starts to come.
We do that. We do that in the workshop, and then we get everyone to look for yellow, and then they all look for yellow. How many things can you think of? And then we tell them to shut their eyes and tell me how many red things they saw. And they're like, "Well, didn't see any red things."
Yeah.
Well, you weren't looking for them, and it's
so that's the
you get what you water, and that attention to, and I think that's what a lot of people with this script is. If they're looking at that, the first thing is to understand that there's that, and seeing that, because then you can not water that, you can just water that, and that's where I think the insight. And that's why I used it like the analogies, because the insight gets you to see differently. And with that, you know, knowing there's the script or the narrative or the egoic mind or whatever you call it, knowing that's there gets you to suddenly see sometimes while you're stressed out, well, I'm watering shit.
Yeah.
That connection to what you think of. Like we both was laughing. I was laughing when you was telling me about the thingy, the garden and in Bali, because I almost knew what was coming. I was laughing. I didn't really know I was laughing. You know, it's like you say, you think a certain way and you feel a certain way. You know, if you then got to think about doing VAT or whatever, you'll feel a certain way. And it's a bit like walking a dog. That you know, you get what you water and you get what you walk, and it's where you're going to take it, sort of thing. That attention.
And that level of consciousness as well, really, isn't it? Being aware that actually what we've got, we're not stuck with it. We can change our perspective. I've got time to tell a very quick story.
Yeah, go for it.
So we went to Cornwall on holiday, and I just bought a brand new bike. Loved this bike, and I was so looking forward to cycling it along the promenade down in Penzance. And so I took it down, and my wife and I went down. And my dad was down there at the same time as well, and he had this rusty old crappy bike. Anyway, first morning, got up and I was like, right, okay, I'm gonna go for a ride. Can't wait to get on my bike. And I kind of reluctantly, politely asked my wife if she'd like to come, knowing that if she came, she would have to ride my bike because she didn't have a bike, and I'd have to ride my dad's rusty piece of shit bike. So I said, no, James, go for a bike ride. Oh, do you want to come? She said, oh, yeah, okay then. Oh, and I was instantly in my... I was
ruined my life.
Yeah, ruined my life. And so I went down.
My daughter does that to me.
Right, okay, unlock the bikes, get them out. And I got on my dad's bike and we went down, got onto the promenade. And we're cycling, I was like, fucking the noises this thing's making, it's crunching and grinding. And I'm looking through gritted teeth, like, fucking damn you for coming out. So, and we were cycling on the promenade, and she was kind of oblivious to it, but I was just, all I could think about was how uncomfortable and how annoyed. I was fuming. I really
ruined your moment.
Ruined the moment. The script ruined the moment. So anyway, we got to the other end of the promenade, and because I'd done BC, this was a really useful aspect to it. We sat down by the quay, and I said, Shay, can I tell you something? She's like, yeah. I said, because I'm feeling actually quite annoyed at the moment, but I don't want to be annoyed.
Yeah.
I'm not choosing this. but it's how I feel.
Yeah.
So if that's all right, if I can share it with you. She said, yeah, fine, go and share it. I said, I'm actually quite annoyed that you could come out on this bike ride because I just wanted to come and ride my bike.
Yeah.
Yes, I've just been in a bad mood since then. And bless her, she's so understanding. And she said, oh, well, do you know what? I can see that. I can understand it. Yeah, it's really, I don't blame you for that. It's fine. And okay, so we sat for a few minutes and chatted and had a bit of a giggle. We got back on our bikes and rode down the promenade. Nothing had changed. I was on the bike. I was on my dad's crappy rust bucket. Shay was on my brand new sparkling bike. Nothing had changed. But my perception, because as we were cycling on, I could feel the wind from the sea and smell the salt water, and I was just so grateful to be there with Sinead, and the sun was shining, and all these things I just hadn't even noticed because I was so stuck in my head and so consumed by like this script of how dare she come out and spoil my fun,
ruin my life.
Yeah, but we'd exposed it, we'd addressed it. I said, look, I would not choose this. I don't want to feel like this.
Yeah.
But this is how I feel. She'd helped to kind of just neutralize the whole thing.
You tell her to go home. Can you walk this old bike home?
Yeah. Thanks very much. And I'll take my bike.
Yeah, thanks.
But that was the amazing thing. Nothing had changed.
Yeah.
It was a totally different experience. And that applies to many aspects of our lives, really.
It's so funny, that expectation of agreements. Like you was going to be down there cycling along on your new bike and that, and the truth of it is, I often think of dead. Like if you think back dead, I did this video about if you add 10p and every penny could bring you back an hour from a decade, like what would you go and buy back? I remember putting the kids to bed and reading to them, and some nights it'll be like just one book. I've got stuff to do. So I'd sit and read to them. Like now, if I had a penny, I'd go back and it would be like, just keep reading. Like there was so little. They used to get in bed with me. One would be either side, and I'd make the noises and stuff. I'd pay that back, and I would just not, that if you could at some point go back to that bicycle ride and just ride that shitty bike when she's dead or you're dead or wherever. You would pay to go back and have that bike ride. The bike wouldn't matter. It's like your first TV. I remember buying my first TV. It was everything. I watched The Matrix on it, the first Matrix. It's in a scrap heap somewhere buried now. Yeah. But at the time, it meant a lot. This book I'm reading at the moment talks about connecting to the to these these things, and how it's just all bullshit. But it's funny how it got in the way of that ride with your wife. I mean, there's systems to them. There's points. Why did you ask her?
but I just feel so blessed that I had that tool to be able to expose it and say, right, let's look at this consciously and deal with it, because I'm not choosing.
Yeah.
And for such a dramatic shift, because if I hadn't had that awareness, if I hadn't done BC and been aware of that, we would have got back on the bikes, if we were still riding back together, and I would have got in and I would have thought that was a shit bike ride. What a waste of time. And by the way, I'm not going to ask you next time because I know what will happen. But no, instead it's just, and I mean, that was like probably 15 years ago, but it's still a really prominent story and it's
powerful, because I think what happens is, and this is where, when you expose the weeds, doesn't matter what happens. If you unpack everything on a weed and leave it, it dies because it's no longer watered. So the fact that you sat there and unpacked, like I'm angry at the moment. Like ego has said to me, I wanted to sit on my new bike. Like, and you unpacked that, well, suddenly the power's gone because it's not getting watered anymore. You've exposed it like a weed. And over time, it just dissipates. So that becomes less powerful. The sting's taken out a bit, and you can see through to, oh, there's a nice wind coming off of the beach, and it smells, and that starts to come through. Because before, it was. Yeah,
you're just unaware of it. Yeah.
It's funny. My daughter keeps saying that I mucked around the other day. There was something that happened in the house. I think it was she just bought some Vimto, and I think I'd finished it off. but I think it was the only glass of Vimto I'd had. And that there was something that she did, and she said to me, and we was talking, I said, Elliot, have I ruined your life? She went, she joked. She was like, yes, you ruined my life. and it was that anger can take away that she wanted that Vimto. And I'd had the only glass I'd had, but it finished it off. And I'd suddenly, it gets in the way of, and you wouldn't choose it, but having that, and I like the idea of mental health, like mental fitness, that everyone's going to get stretched, but it's how quick, like a recovery rate, how quick can you get back to that point? And that's the same with mindset. That I went on the treadmill this morning, got out of breath, and it's taking me less and less time to get back to a good point. It still takes me ages, but with mindset, I'm much better at. I have had moments before where I've got the ump, but I get back very quickly. And that cycle ride, that could have ruined your holiday.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And our relationship.
yeah.
And our marriage, and that script could easily have, and it does ruin a lot of people's marriages. Yes. But we use that same process all the time, me and Shane. I mean, we're very fortunate. We very rarely argue. We have the occasional disagreement, but it's always that case of, okay, I'm feeling angry right now. Why is that? I don't want to feel like this, and let's talk about it, rather than the temptation, which I have done in the past, and a lot of people do. Just keep it inside, fume on it, and it grows. It's like a little seed, a little weed seed is kind of fallen and germinated, and it just grows and grows and grows, and taking over the whole.
What are the machines that you use to rake the garden? So there's a rake, but there's an electronic
cultivator.
Yeah, so I need one of them on my lawn. It's interesting when I soak the garden and rake.
Oh no, sorry, you want a scarifier.
Scarifier, yeah, because I come up with like a whole bag of stuff I've raked from the garden. It doesn't look much different. But you can see all the shit that's in there. And part of that process, I think a lot of my stuff is cleaning. It's not it's getting back to, it's cleaning back to. And a lot of that, if most people did it with their lawns, they'd have like 2 or 3 or 4 bags of shit they never even realised was there. And all it changes is that grass gets to then breathe and flourish, and that process, I think, is like that you can really get to a point where each of you are like, we do a thing at home, we show our bottom teeth. If that basically means fuck off, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah, it's like a dog growling at her.
Yeah, and that process is a bit like a trigger, like, I'm getting 8 or 9 or 10, and then we usually sit back, and whether that's because we do it in the house, like we'll sit down around the table, and my son will come down and sit down, and my wife's really frosty with him. I'm like, and she's got the ump because he's eating quickly or whatever it is. And it's not that. It's the fact that she's called him down for dinner 10 times. And this morning he left shit there and it builds up. And I'm like, she's sitting around, if she'll talk to me normally and Ellie normally, or she'll talk to none of us normally. And we're like, we've got to get this off of our chest, and we get it off of our chest. And then everyone is freer.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing, the release of that, isn't it? Where it's suddenly it's like, I'm good, and we can laugh and joke. And 1 minute we are so fuming, it's like, fuck, I never want to speak to you again. And then the next, you're like, wow, it's just lifted. It's incredible.
Yeah,
really incredible.
Yeah, and I think that's what I got. Yeah, that's that freedom, and using the analogy of weed and the stuff in there is I think a good system for people to be open and to do. So
and on that note, Max, I'm probably going to finish soon, but a little while earlier you were saying about getting a garden and clearing the garden to bare soil, and that can feel really great. But then you've got to plant stuff. Someone once, he was a business coach actually, she said, right, okay, if I clear a patch of grass in my garden, if I clear it back to bare soil, is it true that nothing will grow in that area? And of course, it's not, because all sorts of shit will grow in that area, and unless we consciously start planting, creating.
Yeah, the other thing I did have down to talk about is where you're coming from, and I've been pulled up with my coach from this side. What's in the soil? Because if the soil's got certain attributes to it, weeds will grow more. and or I think it's the environment of where you are. If you're next to a garden full of nettles, you're going to get nettles. So that space there's a lot of things in the environment of who you let in it, like birds come in and this, that, and the other. So there's a lot of things that affect how and what is in that garden. But where you're coming from, I know that. So maybe plants that you've got to plant, if you've got a certain type of soil, because you test soil as gardeners, don't you? And if you need to change that soil, I remember my coach catching me. I was developing engineers, and I had some guys that wouldn't work a weekend because they hadn't got paid their overtime. And they didn't realise I'd given up a lot to try and get this business doing. So I was on site with them, training with them, and putting a lot of money into developing engineers, and they wouldn't work the weekend because they hadn't got paid their overtime. And it worked out that the overtime took an extra week to go through because we had to send the details to the accountants and that. And I remember just thinking, you fucking shit. I remember thinking that, you know, there was a lot going on and we needed to work weekend. I know I can't work weekends because I haven't got paid for last weekend. And I remember just saying it in brief to my coach, and he was a bit like, well, did they know when they was going to get paid? And I was like, no, I didn't even know that it took an extra week for them to get their overtime money. He said, well, should they have known? And I'm thinking, well, yeah, probably. But and I remember thinking, a bit like you in that bike ride, that there was a shift. But I remember thinking that where I was coming from, and long story short is I actually brought everyone in and we'd done a toolbox talk, and I said sorry that I hadn't told you guys that it took an extra week for your overtime to get paid. So when you work generally, if you put overtime in, it comes a week after. And they were like, and they shifted. They was like, oh, we didn't know either. And it changed. But I remember thinking, like, where I was coming from was these guys should have just done it. And I remember thinking there was some truth in that. And I think there is a little bit of truth in some of it. But I remember thinking, that's where I was coming from, and so to shift that soil, I was coming from a bit of a bitter belly.
Well, that's it. It's okay to make assumptions like that. We do, but it's the feelings that it creates inside us which then start to kind of manifest and grow to a point where we're like, well, why the hell haven't they bloody done the weekend? All this. It's just amazing how things can spiral out of control, isn't it? So.
Yeah. So in the gardens, though, if something doesn't grow, you put fertilizer, you change the soil.
Condition it. Yeah.
And that's where I think some of the stuff, when I catch people, you know, coming from a certain place, that work is coming from that, and it's usually a place that you've inherited.
And that's the other thing. Matt, sorry, I hope we can cut this out, but I'm getting knocked on the door.
Yeah, no worries, that's fine.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, we'll be done in a minute anyway.
Shall I wait?
Where are the boys?
They're down there.
Okay, yeah, I'll be out in a minute. So
Shall I go?
they can, if they're happy, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up now because it's gone over.
Just wanted to go back to the fertilizer, because you said that right at the beginning about the fertilizer, and I think this is a really important thing to keep in mind. And certainly I got the inspiration from this from the BC course about fertilizer is basically all the shit that kind of is generated from the garden, which is then all the waste crap that you don't want, and you pile it all into a compost heap, and gradually it turns into beautiful nutrient rich compost. It's amazing, really. That rubbish then becomes the food to feed a beautiful garden, which then feeds the flowers even more. And I think it's easy to feel like, oh, I've got lots of challenges and crap in my life, but actually that's some of the greatest opportunity for massive positive change, because you can then use that as your fertilizer. If you learn to connect with it and understand it and process it, it then becomes a fertilizer to actually drive forward the most wonderful parts.
Yeah, if you hadn't have had those struggles, you wouldn't have done BC. And that where that comes from, like all of the stuff that I think that I've done and learned and worked on, I wouldn't have spent this time doing this work if I hadn't have gone through that point where I was suicidal. That then gave me, and sometimes that is where doing that work, that long-term thing is, if you don't go through that hardship and roll your sleeves up and get out in the garden and do the work, you won't be able to sit there with a glass of wine, with a waterfall coming down and the plants coming out and the birds coming in. You know, you won't be able to. It's that yin yang. I think you need to do the work to the night and day, all that sort of stuff. And I think from that, what they say lightness comes from darkness, or you can't have one without the other. So that's a good place to wrap up, I think, Joe.
Absolutely, Matt. It's been really great talking to you.
Yeah, it's been good. So let's leave it there. So what's the website you've got for Gardens for Good?
Oh, so it's gardensforgood.co.uk, quite simply. So yeah, gardensforgood.co.uk. So yeah, people can see some examples of our work on there. Also, you mentioned you love ferns, Matt. I've actually, as part of the show garden I did last year, designed a very unique seat called the Fern, which, no surprise, is inspired by a fern. It's quite an organic, super comfortable.
Have you got a video where you do a speeded?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So you can see more of that at thefernseat.com as well if you're interested. Right.
Brilliant. Well, cheers for chatting, Joe. It's nice to finally see you.
Yeah, good to see you too, and we'll stay connected. I'm certain.
Yeah, lovely.
Awesome.
Enjoy your Sunday.
If I was there, if it wasn't for a remote interview or social distancing, I'd give you a great big hug right now. So
lovely. Cheers, Joe. Thanks a lot.
Take care, mate. All the best.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.